Good afternoon. I am Daniela Caruso, Director of the Center for the Study of Europe and Professor of Law at Boston University. It is my honor today to speak with the Consul General of Ireland, Laoise Moore. Our topic is solidarity at the time of COVID-19. This is the sixth in a series of interviews we have been conducting with European Consuls General here in Boston. So far, we have spoken to the Consuls General of Greece, Italy, the United Kingdom, and France, and with the Honorary Consul of the Czech Republic. Our aim today is to explore the various responses to the coronavirus pandemic in Europe, and in particular, the various approaches to material solidarity in each country. It is my pleasure today to introduce Laoise Moore, who was appointed Consul General of Ireland to New England in May 2019. Laoise holds a PhD in genetics from Trinity College, Dublin. Upon completing her PhD, Consul Moore worked for the company Accenture. She then joined the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. There, she worked in development cooperation, in the press office, and in the Europe division. She has served at the Consulate General of Ireland in Edinburgh and at the Embassy of Ireland in Malaysia. Immediately prior to coming to Boston, Laoise worked at the Department of Foreign Affairs headquarters in Dublin, where she focused on EU foreign policy. She also worked at the Irish Parliament. From her base in Boston, Consul Moore works with her team to strengthen Ireland's links with New England, to promote Irish culture and interests, and to provide services to Irish citizens in the region. It is my honor today to interview her. Consul, how are you doing today? Welcome.
Not doing too badly today, considering everything that's going on. We're all hanging in here in the team at the Irish Consulate in Boston.
So starting with the way in which the coronavirus epidemic has affected your work in Boston, how would you say your diplomatic job is different because of the pandemic and since its onset?
Yes, I mean, I think that the coronavirus here in Boston, it's had a big effect on our work here at the Irish Consulate in Boston. I mean, we saw some pretty immediate effects when the stay-at-home advisory came into effect in March. We were just about to enter into what was one of the busiest periods in our calendar, which was the marking of St. Patrick's Day, the Irish National Day on March 17th. And that was supposed to be, you know, a series of events all around New England over the course of several weeks, including big celebrations here in Boston and elsewhere. And then for I think very sound and understandable public health reasons, most of these events were cancelled. So that was a big immediate impact on us. I suppose the other impact it's had is been on our daily working lives here at the consulate. You know, we are very concerned for taking appropriate public safety measures and for the safety of our staff. So one of the first things we did was we closed down our public office for safety reasons, and we transitioned to having our team at the consulate work remotely. And that was a big change for us. So the first part for us was getting our systems up and working remotely. Then I suppose what we did after that was we pivoted the entire work of the consulate pretty fundamentally towards providing emergency assistance for people that needed it. We always provide a consular assistance service to Irish citizens, but we literally focused our entire team and all our efforts on that because we have a high number of Irish people, Irish citizens, a big Irish community in this part of the world, a lot of Irish people visiting. We spent a big focus of our time in the initial few weeks assisting people who needed to get home, who were in difficulty. Then I suppose after that, we transitioned our focus more on assisting people who, for a variety of reasons, have decided to stay in this area. A lot of Irish people live here, a lot of Irish people have family here, have jobs, have lives here, and we're focused a lot at the moment actually on trying to support those people who have decided for various reasons to stay. We're working a lot with we're very lucky to have a great range of Irish community organisations in this part of the world, and they are working very much in the front line to help people that are affected, and we are supporting them. I suppose the next thing that we are trying to do is, as the consulate, to try and stay connected with people as much as we can. You know, obviously a consulate is involved in a lot of diplomacy and a lot of public outreach, a lot of events. the nature of that has changed immensely. Everything is virtual these days, so we are doing a lot more virtual events than we would have before. So things like, for example, the consulate would have a regular book club, a group of people that come together to read Irish literature. We've just scheduled our first virtual book club that's going to take place later on in May. We also have a regular Irish language chat night for people in the Boston area that like to improve their Irish language skills. We're going to have one of those virtually. So things like that, we're exploring new ways of staying connected with people, albeit virtually. So I would say that the coronavirus has pretty fundamentally changed the way that we do business as a consulate, and we are like everybody else, I suppose. We're having to work to find new ways to achieve our objectives, and that, I suppose, the other thing to say is it's kind of has disrupted the usual day-to-day consular services like our visa service, our passport service. These have been disrupted, the regular services, but at the same time, we have been able to maintain a 24-hour emergency service for people and citizens that need it. So we can provide emergency travel documents, for example, for people who want to get home, emergency assistance for people who need it. So pretty fundamental change. And I would think that things aren't going to go back to normal anytime soon.
It's been possible to fly from the United States, and in particular from Boston to Dublin. Ireland is not part of the Schengen area, and somehow it's been a gate to Europe. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It has made things easier for us in the consulate and for Irish citizens in this area that flights between Boston and Ireland currently remain. There's an Irish airline, Aer Lingus. It would have regular services between Boston and Dublin. Now these have reduced, but there are still a number of flights every week. That has made it much easier. It's still, there are of course challenges with people needing to get home, but I mean, when I compare with my colleagues elsewhere in the US or elsewhere in the world, it has made it immensely easier for us that Irish people in this part of the world who need to get home to Ireland have the option to do so. And also, I think that connectivity is also helpful for my European colleagues who I am in regular contact with, because there aren't direct links between Boston and all European countries, for example, but there are links, indirect links between Ireland and Boston can be helpful to those people. So I think certainly from our point of view, it has made it easier that those links remain open, albeit at a reduced rate.
Now, moving on to Ireland, your country, how would you describe their approach to the pandemic for citizens of Boston? In which way has it been different, more interesting, better? Will you please describe that for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, I'm watching very closely what's happening in Ireland, but then being situated here in Massachusetts, it gives a good opportunity to sort of compare and contrast. I mean, I suppose the biggest difference that I'm seeing is Ireland is, it's a small country, so there's one set of rules for everybody, whereas the United States is a much bigger country, and there are different approaches being taken in different parts of the states. I guess Massachusetts possibly has a closer sort of set of measures to what we are taking in Ireland than maybe other parts of the states, but there are some differences. I mean, I would say on the whole, perhaps the measures around, say, restrictions on movement to some degree are probably stricter in Ireland. So for example, there are restrictions on movement beyond 2 kilometers in Ireland. People can exercise, for example, within 2 kilometers every day, provided they maintain appropriate social distance. People can travel beyond those 2 kilometers for sort of essential reasons like buying food or medical appointments and things like that. But there is, and while there is a stay-at-home advisory here in Massachusetts, I think that the restrictions on movement in Ireland are greater. The other difference in Ireland I've noticed is that there is a measure called cocooning, where the government is strongly advising people over the age of 70 or people who may be vulnerable due to, for example, a medical condition. It is advising those people to stay at home at all times to protect their health. And you don't see a measure like that here in Boston, albeit that people are advised to stay at home as much as possible. And I think there's been a high degree of compliance with the movement restrictions in Ireland, despite the obvious difficulties that people are experiencing, despite the hardships. Then there are other differences. For example, the advisory to wear masks in Massachusetts and Boston, we don't have that at home in Ireland. Another approach then, for example, in Ireland has been, there's been from the start a strong focus on ramping up testing as much as possible. I think Ireland is something like 6 per capita in terms of the number of tests that are being carried out, even though I know the government would like to increase testing more. There was a very strong contacts tracing program, sort of from the very, very first case in Ireland, in order to try and to maintain control of the disease insofar as possible. Now, I know that has been adopted, albeit at a later stage in Boston. So, I mean, look, I would say that there are similarities and differences in the approach. And then, I mean, comparing Ireland to other European countries, I guess there's variation in European countries on their measures, and some have stricter measures in place, even stricter restrictions on movements, and then some not so much. And I think Ireland, one of the things we are doing is we are watching very closely other European countries and then other countries around the world to see the kinds of measures that they are taking and what these mean, because this is early days for everybody. We're all trying to figure out how best to protect our health and our public safety, and then also maintain the well-being of and the economic resilience of our citizens and of our countries.
So there is one internal border within the Irish island, and that's with Northern Ireland. I was wondering whether any complications have occurred, any difficulties in coordination of policies below and above, or maybe to the south and to the north of the border inside the Irish island. Would you tell us about that?
Sure. So there is a border on the island of Ireland, albeit it has been for many years an open border, and it is really extremely important to us that remains the case, because there is a constant flow of people and goods over that border. There are people who live in one jurisdiction and work in another, or have families in one jurisdiction and another, and so it's really important for us that border remains open, and that has been the case so far throughout this crisis, and it will remain the case. There are already existing structures of cooperation between Ireland and Northern Ireland, and also between Ireland and the UK as a whole, that exist as part of the Good Friday Agreement. So, for example, there is the North-South Ministerial Council. It's a council that meets of all the ministers of all the government departments, meet periodically to discuss cooperation. And this is something that goes on in normal times, but there have been specific meetings on coronavirus and on cooperation. So, for example, our Taoiseach, our Prime Minister, and the First Minister of Northern Ireland have met to discuss coronavirus. There's recently been a memorandum of understanding signed between Ireland and Northern Ireland on cooperation, specifically on coronavirus, on areas like, looking at shared approaches where this is warranted, sharing information, sharing ideas on messaging, looking at joint procurement, things like that. So it is recognised, I think, that Ireland is an island, albeit one with 2 jurisdictions, and it's very important that we cooperate and communicate with each other.
Is there something in the culture of your country, at the level of organization of healthcare, at the level of religious ties, cultural traditions, that has made solidarity salient in some way in this particular context?
Yeah, I mean, I think like other countries, you have seen in Ireland that the way that people have responded to this has been in a spirit of solidarity. I think this has been evident in Ireland. I mean, Ireland typically scores quite high on things like OECD and UN measures on quality of life and human development index. And one of the things that is often cited in those studies is the degree of, I guess, community connectedness and cohesion in Ireland. I think that there is a general culture of solidarity already there in Ireland, and I think that has really helped us all respond to the coronavirus. I'm thinking, for example, I was talking about cocooning of the over 70s earlier. So my mother is at home in Dublin, and she is in that position, and I'm in regular contact with her, for example, and just the amount of support that she has been getting from her community has been incredible, not only from her friends and her family, but things like, for example, some neighbors that she had never met posted notes through her door saying, you know, if you ever need anything, if you never ever need us to go to the shops, please let us know, ring this number. She's been in contact with them. If anybody needs help, they can contact their local council or community organizations. Things like, I've heard stories of police officers doing grocery shopping for people who couldn't go out. When your postman calls and you're an elderly, vulnerable person, they'll kind of shout through the letterbox and ask you, is there anything you need? And then one other thing, then the local football team, the GAA, which is an Irish sporting organisation, they have teamed up with one of our local my mother's local supermarkets, so they're delivering her groceries, for example. So that's kind of an example of some of the community solidarity. I think there's political solidarity on display as well. I mean, you'll obviously see in Ireland, there's the usual kind of political discourse and disagreements that you'll see in any kind of healthy democracy. But I do think that there has been a considerable degree of political cohesion in Ireland's response to. So for example, the government doesn't have a majority at the moment in Ireland, but yet the government and the parliament were able to pass some pretty far-reaching economic measures and measures on restrictions on movement in Ireland, because the political parties came together and recognised that there was a common interest in doing this. And you can see that kind of culture of solidarity as well coming through, for example, when Ireland was responding to Brexit and the Brexit negotiations. So I think in part it's because we're a small country, but I do think that there is a sense of common purpose and solidarity, and I think it is helping us all through what's a very difficult situation.
Okay, now let's take it to the level of Europe. Solidarity is a word in the treaty and has been articulated in several ways in different countries. Would you say that the relationship between Ireland and the European Union institutions has been characterized by solidarity in the current context?
I mean, putting COVID aside for a moment, and the whole question of Ireland and EU solidarity, I mentioned Brexit briefly a few moments ago. Ever since the Brexit negotiations have been underway, Ireland has, as probably the member state that's most deeply affected by Brexit, it has received, I would have to say, a really extraordinary degree of solidarity from all of the other EU member states, and it's something that we are extremely appreciative of. So I would like to think that Ireland, especially having had the experience of the last few years, really understands the value of EU solidarity. And when faced with something like the coronavirus that affects all of Europe and affects all of us, and there are some member states that have been really badly hit, we think that EU solidarity is really, really important here, because coronavirus is bigger than any one of us. It's bigger than any member state. If we are going to beat this and come out of it and prosper and thrive in the future, we're all going to have to take steps together. So we do think EU solidarity is really important in both in dealing with the immediate sort of health measures and supports for business and unemployment. And then as we look to the economic recovery in future, we would like to see the EU member states all working together on this. And I mean, I think, you mentioned it's a fierce debate, and it is, I mean, the EU is, it's 27 different member states. They're all going to have lots of different traditions and cultures and perspectives. And I've worked in the EU before, and there's always a lot of discussion around things, and maybe around nothing more so than financial measures. But, you know, I think already the EU has taken some pretty unprecedented steps in response to coronavirus. I mean, you've got joint procurement of PPE, for example, there's funding of joint research efforts. There's been a huge amount of cooperation on working to repatriate thousands and thousands of EU citizens. There have been, the European Council has agreed a package of 540 billion euros to deal with the health aspects of it, the unemployment aspects, you know, providing help to citizens who are affected, to businesses who are affected, to countries who are affected. So, and then there's, of course, the European Central Bank, which is buying assets and has said it will do what it takes. So I think there's already a huge amount is being done, and there are discussions underway on what can further be done. And yeah, I mean, they can be contentious discussions, but, you know, to a certain extent, I think that's the way the EU works. There's 27 different voices there. Of course, there's going to be differences, and the way that we work through it is we compromise, and then we get there in the end. You know, I mean, I think like I have heard people say, oh, you know, the coronavirus is going to be the end of the EU solidarity. But, you know, there were voices saying that the Brexit was the end of the EU, that the financial crisis was the end of the EU, that the migration crisis was the end of the EU. But, you know, I have great faith in the resilience of the EU. And I think that we will work together and we will get through this.
And so are you confident that if reforms are needed to do the right thing, these reforms eventually will come into place?
I think that they will. I mean, I think it can take time, because I think that if you look at the way that the EU makes progress, it's through compromise, and it's through, you know, incremental steps to take the action that's needed. But I think if you look back at the track record of the EU, it can take time sometimes, sure, but it does step up and do what's needed. So I would like to think that it will do so again in this case.
Lisha, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you with us today, and thank you for engaging in this really interesting interview. We learned a lot from you. We look forward to having you here for other discussions on the subject of Europe. We've started with the diplomatic side of the coronavirus. We'll go on with further technical inquiries into what's happened and what to do about it. We really appreciate your being with us. Thank you so much once again.